As a trans man, how do you navigate being seen as both a personal individual and a public symbol of representation?
Sports has been such a huge part of my mental health, but it hasn't been the only part. I do think that there's something to be said about healing in community. And I think having relationships and like real authentic intimacy with people, and not talking about romantic intimacy, but actually like having honest conversations. Like, I think a lot of times people don't want to be in the awkwardness of like, how do I bear my full self and like not have someone cringe from the ugly parts of it. And I think a lot of my journey has been supported by, whether it was, you know, my romantic partner, my friendships in particular that have been there for decades at this point.
I've struggled with perfectionism like all my life. I still struggle with it now. And like having really close friends that I can be myself around fully has helped a lot. Because for a long time I kept people at an arm's length because I didn't want them to get too close, because ultimately they would see the imperfections and I didn't want them to see that. That's what makes me human, and it's okay to be imperfect. No one is perfect, and it's freeing. That's something that when I first started my transition, I also sought out therapy to help with managing my anger, managing my transition itself, but like what it would mean, what it would look like to be someone that looks like me out in the world. And I feel like I was very fortunate to have been born in New York City and raised in New York with access to mental health services, access to like the community health centers that specialize in trans-specific care. And there were trans folks everywhere, and I was able to see what I could become in them.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that's part of my healing journey, was like once I started to see more and more trans people in the world, not just even within my community, but like in movies and TV shows, on magazine covers, you know, it finally made me feel like I belong. Like, because for so long I feel like invisibility makes you question, like, should I be here? Like, should I exist, you know? Because there's no one like this. And then seeing that and coming out here in LA and finding the queer community, and then just really like diving in and immersing myself in the queer community gave me a purpose.
I don't think my story would be complete until I was actually vulnerable enough to ask for help. And I think that was probably the hardest thing for me, is to like actually realize when I'm like down in my dumps to not isolate. I'm really someone who's like isolated. I'm like, I'll build myself up. I'll figure this out myself. And having enough people be like, hey, we're here to help you too. Like, you can lay low. Like, we'll build you up. You don't have to have it always be on you for yourself at all the time. Like, as much as you show up for other people, let us show up for you.
Right. It's an interesting thing about like also masculinity and feeling like that's what you have to, you know, put on your boots and just go out there and do it and not ask for help, and the feeling that no one's going to feel sorry for you, so you just have to do it on your own. But that's where community comes in, and I think community is important. We all need community, just regardless of gender identity. There's also the softness that I was able to, I feel like, bring into my masculinity once I felt whole. I didn't feel like I had to be so performative with my masculinity, and you know, the anger kind of subsided because I was just like, okay, I'm here. So much so that now I'm sometimes perceived as a feminine gay man. So I was just like, whatever, you know?
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, it's so interesting. For me, I've actually started going to therapy for the last few years, and it's really changed my life because I thought, you know, I'm turning 50 in a couple days, and for 49 years, I thought my purpose was to be of service. First conditionally, and then it was because I thought, like, oh, I have community. This is what you do when you love your community. And then through therapy, I realized that I conditioned either myself or was conditioned by the world or my existence to think my purpose was to be of service because it was actually my survival instinct. Because if I was of value to people, if I can provide then I won't be discarded or abandoned. And that was really, really hard for me to accept, but I think in recognizing that now, like I've been working on just finding like, what does Nik want? What does Nik's existence mean if my job was not to be of service, but to just be, you know? And I feel like a lot of what resonated with me, with what you both shared, was like finding my vulnerability and being honest and sharing things like that was something, you know, 10 years ago, I would not share my vulnerability in that way of telling you, you know, even just me questioning my existence in that way, you know, and I feel like really coming into my masculinity, the non-toxic masculinity is to be so open and vulnerable that it's not, I don't even think it's soft, it's actually so strong, you know, it's such a strength to find the ability to be so vulnerable.
Sometimes visibility can feel like a double-edged sword. We have, on one hand, being visible helps other folks in the community maybe find the language for who they are, describing their identities, how they want to present themselves to the world. And then on the other side, because we're such a small community, or we make up such a small percentage of our population, we're easy to like be targets and then used as a scapegoat. And we're seeing that now with our current political administration.
Yeah, I think I'm hearing people's fear responses, especially young people right now.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting, you know, being 12 years into my transition, having a lot of folks I've known who are 20 plus years in the transition, and just the reality of like, it's always been unsafe to be trans in modern times. That's a reality. Even as we're navigating what's now, this isn't new. What was new is that we started having more visibility. We started having more access to medical care. We've had these things and suddenly they were pulled away. And I think especially for younger generations, it feels like a new attack because they kind of came up in a way where they saw us, they saw examples, they saw a pathway forward that we kind of had to figure out how to get there. And it feels like that's been ripped away and suddenly there's this new restriction. But I think we only have to look to even people 10 years older and realize like this has always been a dangerous situation in this world. This has always been a battle consistently, that the literal back of the Pride movement was built off of trans and gender nonconforming individuals. This is our story. Our story is about resisting. Our story is about, unfortunately, being harmed and still coming back every single day to be ourselves, regardless if we got permission from the government or the locals around us. And I always ground myself in that reality. It's like we are warriors, we have been warriors, and we have been consistently put into the line of fire, and yet we still walk every day with our head held high.
Our community is so resilient because that's all we've ever known. You know, it's like when I've had talks with other people or done like interviews asking about these kind of similar questions, I'm like, it's all I've known. Like from the day I was born, I feel like I've had to fight to exist, you know? And I think the hardest part for me personally is that it feels like, you know, when you're a kid, like you made a friend and you feel like, oh, they like me, like they finally like me. You know, when I started learning how to speak English, you know, they stopped bullying me because I was like part of the community now, right, in school. But then you find out later that they're talking shit behind your back and they're actually not your friend. That's kind of how I feel about society and trans people, is that like we had progressed. And I felt like, oh, we were finally starting to get accepted. You know, we had, you know, trans people on the cover of magazines and like winning awards and like all of these things that I finally felt like, oh, we can slowly kind of come out of our, you know, haven, you know, and be part of society because we're finally being accepted. And then all of a sudden, they're like, just kidding, not really. We don't actually really like you, you know? And that hurts. I think more than any like anger at stupid like administrative legislative like policies, is just that like my feelings I feel like are hurt is because I thought they believed in us just as humans. They don't even look at us as humans, and that sucks. Yeah.
And I think part of that, you know, is kind of like when you think that those kids are cool with you and then finding out they're talking about you behind your back. I think we've been proven now of like who's actually for us.
Right.
I think people were more than willing to just tolerate us because we were put into that position, but as soon as they made it okay to directly say all the things that they wanted to say, they said it. So for me, this is highlighting who my real people are, in a way that like before, everyone got to kind of just be like around it, and now allies are having to prove that they're actual allies versus putting a badge on themselves and patting themselves on the back because they use someone's proper pronoun. Are you going to actually stand on the front line with me?
Right.
People are having to make that choice right now, and I think as much as it sucks, and I enjoyed my comfort of thinking like, okay, maybe things were gonna get better, I think this is what's going to be pushing people to actually move this world further, because now you don't have a choice, but we're going to have to fight for it.
I've seen and heard folks within our own community say things about the T in the LGBT community, and they've purposefully even started targeting and saying things then, around me at least, about non-binary people. And I'm just like, so I'm okay because I'm palatable, because I look quote unquote normal to you. At the end of the day, I'm still trans and I'm still other. The way that when I'm seeking healthcare, when I'm moving about the world, sure, if I'm perceived as a cis person, there might be this element of safety, but it's really very surface level. As soon as someone knows that I'm trans, then it's dangerous again. So it's just ridiculous to like then just start picking different people and the most marginalized folks even within the community to start saying, okay, this is your fault that things are the way that they are, and it makes me really upset.
And I feel like it's their ignorance that they're buying into that, because that's literally what the other side is trying to do, is they're trying to divide us bit by bit so that they have more power, because when we're not together, we're weaker.
I think, you know, in particular what this administration is highlighting is the importance of intersectionality, because we have to realize none of us are safe unless all of us are safe. Right. There is someone out there who is a disabled, non-English speaking, undocumented, Black, non-binary trans femme out there, right? Like, how do we make sure that that person is safe, and realize that if we make sure the most marginalized, absolutely the most marginalized of us are safe, then that means safety for all of us.
I had a similar experience prior to transitioning where, because I was larger and I had started to lift weights and I was trying to build my body to look more masculine even before I knew what medically transitioning was, going into the girls' or women's locker room, I would always be questioned as to why I was there. I had a group of women stand outside my stall and like tell me to get out of the bathroom, and I had to like show them my breasts to prove that I was like, I belong here, which was ridiculous. And it's, at the end of the day, it's about policing people's bodies and telling people what boxes you need to fit into perfectly, otherwise you're not really what you say you are, and it's especially true for women. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes of our movements was separating. I think that the trans movement is nothing without the women's movement is nothing without the trans movement.
I know for me, like, one thing I learned was that, you know, I never even thought I would make it to 50, right? So to me, like, that in itself is an accomplishment. And to be able to walk this earth at this age where I am doing the things I love, and I'm literally just me as I am, and what you see is what you get, you know? And I think that if I could go back and tell myself something, I feel like the most important thing, it used to be, is like, don't let anyone tell you you can't. But now I feel like I want to tell myself is, all you have to do is just be you. And that's it, you know? So, yeah.
I think I always find it difficult to give advice to young people of like, oh, if I told you this, everything would be okay, because I feel it's a lie. You know, I always want to be honest with younger people or people in general. You know, I don't have a way forward for them. I don't have these particular steps because their own experience is going to be completely their own. And I think the only thing that I can offer is we only live this life once. Maybe you believe in reincarnation, but it will never be this body you're in with these people you're around. And even when things are hard, man, this life is so beautiful. I think, there's something really beautiful about being an artist with our own lives that I really want everyone to be able to experience and be able to keep living and move forward so they can experience it in the fullness of life, because this is never guaranteed.
And I do know that, like, for all of the young people out there, we all have a chance to mold ourselves the way, like you said, the way we want to be and the way we should be for us. And for me, like, I didn't get therapy until very recently, and that was really because in my childhood I had a very bad experience with therapy, because that person I didn't feel seen or heard, right? And I think that really, like, there's no one way to find help. I think you can go to your friends, you can go to your community, you can go find services. There's so many more resources now than before, than like when I was young. And I gotta say, it really made such a difference for me. I've had probably like 4 to 5 therapists in the last year. It wasn't until I finally got a trans therapist that I was like, holy shit, like, I finally feel heard, and it was life-changing. And I feel like it's something I do highly recommend people do seek support in mental health, because, it really helped me a lot.
I don't have the answer. I used to feel like I did at one point, and now as folks lose access to care, saying like, hey, just find a therapist that you trust, that you can talk about your issues with, it might become more dangerous. So I would say, if you have people around you, whether they're your relatives or your close friends that you trust, where you can have conversations, create that community, so that you feel like you have that support for yourself. And then when you feel safe enough to do so, if you're looking to medically transition, then finding the avenues that work for you in your journey. Because obviously, like you said, all our journeys are very, very different, very unique. Ultimately, we want the same things. We want to be seen. We want to be, we want to feel whole. We want to be loved. We want to be affirmed. But that's going to look different from person to person.
I'm a really introverted person, and I'm very reclusive. I don't need much social interaction. Like, this is gonna exhaust me for like 2 weeks. I'll need to recharge for a while. But I made a decision at the end of 2013. My dog had passed away, and so she had been like, Mike used to go home and do these things, and my like company, in addition to like, probably like the 3 friends I had. But I made a decision when she passed away that I was going to spend an entire year intentionally building community with folks here. And I said yes to everything. I went to every party, I went to every birthday, I went to every like panel, community space, everything like that. And then after a year, I was like, okay, I'm good. Like I've done enough. But it was such a transformative time for me, because it forced me into a position where I was uncomfortable, especially if a lot of them were like group meetings and actually having to speak, but also listening and forming those connections. I think it was one of the biggest growths for me. I met a lot of people who became and still are my friends. And so sometimes it's also realizing that the thing that you don't want to do the most may be the thing that you need to do. And in particular, even when you're someone like myself who's like really can internally process really well, that's kind of the way I enjoy going through my hard moments, and still to this day is by myself, but forcing myself to actually reach for people in a way that was uncomfortable taught me how to do it for when I need to. And I think having that skill set, the relationships built, the ability to actually communicate when I'm feeling bad and I'm like, oh, is this the time I need someone? Yeah, this is some time when I need to reach out to someone. that would be my advice to the people out there who are like, I'm good, I got it by myself. I'm like, maybe you don't. Maybe just try. Just try for a little bit, try something different. You may find out that this was exactly what you needed at the time. Find support, find community, find yourself.
Your journey to wellness starts here.
To learn more about gender-affirming mental health services or social support programs, visit apaitssg.org.